Iran from it. I mean, it's just a lot. Oh, I mean, in times like these, I really miss Dwight. You know, Dwight McKee. Oh,
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't realize I
oh,
was muted.
no, I've just, but everything he said, it's coming to pass. Everybody, folks got angry with him, and he said, I'm telling you what I see." But I'm going to reread Gideon's Spies. There's so much.
Yeah, I'm getting it now. I'm gonna add it to my list.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going to reread that because when I heard that was in that, it's just like the book on Robert Maxwell. So I'm going to get right to it. Hello, my person who's looking. I know this is an odd time for me, but I think I'm going to go back to early mornings because I like this. I always liked early mornings. I don't like interrupting the middle of my day. So we're going to get right to it. We're just over a minute here. And let me get to, just to keep it clean, let's give me 20 seconds so I can come in at 1:30 because we are up. But I'm glad to see you, Bryce. Always, always, always. And the audience enjoy you so much.
I'm
And
glad.
I'm going to give this to you. And if you would push this out on your social media networks, that would be great. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you. Reach out to me on all social media platforms on Facebook, Santita Jackson and Friends. Please. That's the only place where I can accept new friends. And I am now on Upscrolled because of a lot that you're not allowed to say on TikTok. Many people are moving over to Upscrolled. So please find me there. I moved over there too. I think I might have a picture of me at 3 or 4 months old. That's my screenshot. I was trying to find them. But let's talk today with Bryce Green. We catch him uh, every week on this show. We've got a run up to war with Iran. Will that happen? It seems more and more likely by the day. But the Epstein files, there is an Epstein files fallout that just continues to grow. And now you have bipartisan calls for the release of these 3 million plus heavily redacted files. But what people have seen has been very disturbing. Indeed, there was a congresswoman who drop site news caught coming out of one of the, I guess, where she was watching the videos, and she said there are a lot of sick Fs. That's all I can tell you. And she looked disgusted. And then, being in the media, being in the press, you are hearing a lot of very disturbing things about what people are hearing, about what they have seen, um, relating to children, children, children. So we need to talk about that. And we need to look at the trafficking of children, boys and girls, underage boys and underage girls. Uh, and we need to look at the people who were compromised and what they were compromised for. There's just a lot going on here. So, Janae, how you doing, sweetie? Everybody, happy Black History Month, my sister. And let us uh, let us really take this apart because I think that if we take it apart, Bryce Green, then we can see why so many people are running for cover. Of course, you can catch Bryce Green, Bryce, Bryce, Green with an E, on Substack. Of course, you can reach out to him on in social media. He takes on all comers, so be careful if you want to reach out to him on X. The Green BJ, the Green BJ. Welcome back to the show.
It's
So
good to be back here.
always, always. The Epstein files, the fallout continues to grow. Instead of the story going away, it is now in the forefront. And more Americans, Republican and Democrat, people who did not care. A Republican uh, senator, she said, I didn't care. I was like, well, rather, she was ambivalent. But after seeing uh, these film, She said, no, 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 you need to release everything. After reading what was unredacted, she said, everybody needs to know everything. This is a horror. And if these people are saying that, I'm horrified as I look at uh, reports about what is contained in these files. It is it's frightening. It's frightening. It's frightening about what they did to the children. It's frightening that some of the most powerful people in the world have had this held over their heads, and how this has shaped our lives, Bryce. So let's step back, because Maxwell testified just a couple of days ago, and she pled the fifth, just over and over and over again. And she said, if the president gives her clemency, she'll talk. I said, wow, that's a power move. She has a lot of power. I mean, I don't know anyone who looks a president of the United States in the eye. And whatever you think about the president or the presidency, this is the most powerful position in the world at this time. She said, I'll talk, but you better give me clemency. Otherwise, here we go. Bryce, what are we looking at?
So let's start with this question about Ghislaine and what we should make of her power move, as you say. The first thing to understand about Ghislaine and her imprisonment and her relationship with the Trump administration and with the Clintons and the elite faction in the United States at large is that she's been being protected, right? I think you all remember last year when Ghislaine was transferred from max security prison and given all these perks, and has like a little pet and has more privileges than a prisoner of her caliber ought to have. That seems to be very clearly related to her knowledge of not just what's in the Epstein files, but her knowledge of the whole Epstein operation to begin with. Because, people seem to forget that she was the partner in crime and that she is one of the only people who have the level of knowledge that someone like Jeffrey Epstein would have, that the files that the FBI the DOJ is releasing can only approach a fraction of that. And so she really has the ability to blow this thing wide open, or she has the ability to shut it down. And there's been a lot of people speculating about what a deal between Maxwell and the DOJ would look like. The idea that she would get clemency for speaking seems to translate directly into the fact that she would get clemency for exonerating Trump, right? For saying that Trump, had nothing to do with this, or if he was involved to the extent that he was doing so as an informant, or she could put forth all sorts of statements that the press would dutifully run with and accept as fact, that would exonerate Trump from this. And this is especially necessary because these last release of files have been very damaging to Trump. We've seen people in Trump's orbit. We've seen people from the first Trump administration, people who, Trump himself was mentioned in the files a hefty number of times, and often in the context of howling around these close networks that surround Epstein, and in some cases actually being accused of heinous, horrific crimes. And so, you know, uh, regardless of what else is in those files, Ghislaine Maxwell can offer a very useful tool for the Trump administration that would be beneficial to both him and her. But the fact is, given her proximity to this entire affair and her relationship with the powers that be, well, we can't really, and the incentive structures involved, we can't really trust what she says on face value. I mean, that's just that should go without saying. And so, whatever she says as a result of her deal, I mean, we can really only take it with a grain of salt.
So, who is Jeffrey Epstein?
That's a good question.
I,
uh,
I don't I don't think we've asked that. Well, we've asked the question in passing, but no one has answered the question. They just say he's a shadowy figure, but shadowy figures are not allowed to accumulate the kind of wealth that he was allowed to accumulate or control it.
I don't know. Maybe it seems like maybe only shadowy figures are allowed to accumulate
Well,
that
no,
wealth.
there is no
Eh,
there now there, but to your point, because what do they say? You're not elected, you're selected.
right. And
and not just
Epstein
for
was part of
office,
the
but
selection class. Like he was part
yeah,
of the class of people that were, you know, deciding how the world was going to run, deciding where major funding went, deciding or connecting networks of elites together to make decisions. If you go through these emails, you see he's connected with all sorts of elite networks from Silicon Valley to Harvard to the actual uh, halls of government. And remember, one of the earlier releases a few months ago showed that he was actually texting a congresswoman during a congressional hearing. I believe this was the hearing of Michael Cohen, texting congresswomen questions to ask, just directly intervening in these proceedings. And so but that doesn't answer the question of who he is, and I think that's because we don't really have an answer of who he is.
but
We
don't you
know
think that
some of his
broadly answers the
origins.
question?
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
as you go into his origins, but broadly that does answer that he's part of a particular class of people. But what are
Yeah.
his origins? Because they seemed ordinary enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, Epstein's origin, if you go back to some of the earliest press reports about Epstein being a socialite figure, I mean, his major start seems to be at the Dalton School, I believe is what it's called. The Dalton School was where he taught math for some reason, despite not having a college degree, despite not being especially intelligent. I mean, you've read these emails. He's not really, all that. Specialize in any given field. Uh, but and yet he lands this job at the Dalton School, and the school is headed at the time by a guy named Donald Barr, and Donald Barr is his own shadowy connections, but he's the father of William Barr,
Hmm.
who was Trump's attorney general, who was uh, instrumental in helping to uh, shade over or cover up parts of Iran Contra during the 80s. I mean, these the connections run deep. And for somehow he was able to impress enough people at as a teacher that he was given a job in high finance, and somehow he made a bunch of money in high finance, made a bunch of connections to the point where people like Les Wexner in the 90s were signing over their entire estate to Jeffrey Epstein to control, essentially making Epstein the controller of Les Wexner's wealth. Wexner, of course, is someone who was also involved in Iran Contra, and he is the magnate behind Abercrombie and Victoria's Secret, both of companies with very troubled histories. But Epstein was deeply connected with this guy,
Wait, because they
and
just had a big scandal in which they were the former head of Abercrombie and Fitch. Uh, and this is amazing. This came out in the BBC, but no one talks about it here. They were drugging boys. I mean, and young men. They were drugging young men who were ambitious to be models, and many of them were straight. And so that they would be more compliant, they would drug them so that they could have their way with them, to put it
yeah, and this was
right.
a few years ago. The ex the CEO was accused of, I mean, essentially running a sex trafficking ring,
Hmm.
uh, trying to traffic young men and or boys. And this is not unlike the stories that you heard about Victoria's Secret,
Hmm.
and the case with women. But both of these empires were solidified by Les Wexner, who was Jeffrey Epstein's chief patron. And
Hmm.
now, around the time that Epstein's star is rising, so to speak, I mean, he's also getting involved with all sorts of high finance activity. He's going around telling people about how he's involved in intelligence agencies and getting involved in. He described his work, I believe, as like financial bounty hunting. Like he would find money, like he would understand the ways in which the financial system works enough that he was able to be useful to people looking for money or looking to hide money or what have you. But this is when he started being close friends with the Maxwells, like the Ghislaine Maxwell. In the late '90s, he starts becoming very close with her. Some people call her, her boyfriend or his girlfriend. Some people just say like, mistress, just friend, whatever their relationship. They became essentially partners in crime, and they used their influence. They had a house in the Florida area, that they were able to traffic young girls to and from. Many of the young women who came out and described their experience being victimized by Epstein talk about how Ghislaine was an integral part in that. And I think the partnership with Epstein and Ghislaine is one of the most indicative of Epstein's origins. If you set aside all the other connections, in that Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who is a famous Israeli spy who was deeply connected to all intelligence agencies around the Western world and in Russia as well. He was famous for uh, like selling the Promise software. If you know that scandal, the software that was used to run databases that the Israelis had put a backdoor into, and the software was sold to numerous law firms and government agencies around the United States. And Robert Maxwell was a very key component in selling that. And so the fact that his daughter was so close to Jeffrey Epstein indicates a further and deeper intelligence connection of Mr. Epstein and his entire milieu. Um, uh, One interesting thing about the emails is that Epstein was actually discussing Robert Maxwell in one of these emails, in which he describes him as being passed away, not dying or being killed exactly, but somewhere in the middle. And this is because of the circumstances of Maxwell's death, and that he was, uh, according to the story, he was threatening to release information about intelligence activities from the Israelis and the Americans, and then one day he falls off his yacht and is found dead. Well, Epstein describes this as being passed away because it's very suspicious that the circumstances of his death, suddenly randomly falling off his yacht after making threats to intelligence agencies. It's one of the classic, like, oh, he fell out of a window kind of stories. But this is something that Epstein himself was keenly aware of and was discussing this in emails. And the connection with his daughter should only solidify in our minds that Epstein was deeply connected to intelligence. And that's even before we go into the deeper Israeli connections, the long relationship with former Israeli defense minister and later prime minister Ehud Barak, who was, you know, Epstein ended up introducing Ehud Barak to Palantir and Peter Thiel, and Epstein also uh, put together meetings between Ehud Barak and Harvard people, between Alan Dershowitz and Noam Chomsky and Steven Pinker and people like that. I mean, this man was so deeply connected in some of the most important and high level the forces shaping our world. I think that you wouldn't expect to have a full view of it because that world is so deeply obscured through state secrecy and other mechanisms that we're only meant to grasp the outlines of this. But these intelligence connections certainly explain why a trafficking ring was able to persist for so long, and it certainly explains why officials, not only from this current Trump administration, but also the Biden administration before him, were involved in covering this up, essentially uh, peppering over it. It explains the mysterious circumstances, or it would go towards explaining the mysterious circumstances surrounding Epstein's own death, in which cameras were mysteriously not working, video footage was deliberately distorted, the guard somehow fell asleep, what have you. Like this is straight out of the world of intelligence intrigue, and there's really no other way to understand this Epstein saga or the official silence surrounding the Epstein saga without understanding this intelligence connection. And there are many more connections that we can get into.
Well, I mean, well, just give me a couple of them, because somehow or another it seems that this has shaken the powerful, shaken power to its foundations. because
Well,
you've got Thomas Massey who's saying either you release the names or I'm going to go nuclear. Wow.
yeah, I think that we haven't seen it affect power in the United States as much as we've seen it affect power elsewhere.
Yeah.
For example, in the United Kingdom, where I don't think they're a bastion of democratic governance or anything, but they
Mhm.
seem to have a more adversarial press corps, and they seem to hold their politicians far more accountable than we do here. And over there, one of the Epstein associates that was uh, really caught in the crossfire is Peter Mendelsohn, and of course Prince Andrew. Well, not Prince Andrew. It's I forget his like
Andrew
Andrew
Windsor Mountbatten.
Mountbatten. Yeah,
Yeah.
Windsor Mountbatten. Yeah, because they stripped him of his prince title because they actually have a reaction over there to these sorts of things. Here, I mean, Peter Mendelsohn, who was Keir Starmer's ambassador to the United States, was just fired. Like had to resign. Like it's gonna resign in disgrace and have his whole reputation and name tarnished forever because of his connections to Epstein. And Keir Starmer, his government might fall because Starmer knowingly put Mendelsohn in this position despite these connections to Epstein. Uh, that's a level of accountability. Who knows what will happen? Who knows if these people will be sent to prison or if there'll be serious investigations? But at the very base level of public reaction, that level of accountability isn't something that we're seeing here in the United States. We're seeing mostly muted reactions. I mean, maybe hysteria in the press. And, I think there was a guy who was going to be a contributor at CBS who may no longer be a contributor at CBS. But that seems really to be the most significant consequence of these Epstein file releases. I mean, like for all the people that have been involved in Epstein's orbit, for all the people that have been exchanging disgusting emails, I mean, maybe people's personal life has suffered, but overall, the structures of power, they remain unchanged by this release. But we'll see if Thomas Macy and
Mhm.
Rokana, whose work I genuinely applaud in bringing to light the stories of these survivors and pushing through this legislation to get the files released and staying on it even after the legislation was passed, just to ensure that it's implemented properly. I applaud them for all that. And if they're able to continue to get information released, I mean, more power to them. But information contrary to what people say is not always power, right? You're not gonna just because there's a name there and you saw them doing disgusting things or what have you. I mean, if the levers of power don't care, then or if there's not enough significant public uproar, then I mean that won't matter. I mean, Trump has been. I think Trump is the great example of how the tolerance levels of our public have been shifted so far. If there was pick a day in the last year and a half or of Trump's administration, most days there would be a scandal that would have sunk other presidents. That would have been wall to wall news. I mean, just pick one. Just like the other day, we learned that Marco Rubio was faking negotiations with Cuba
Mm.
uh, um, to prevent Trump from actually negotiating with Cuba. That's a major scandal. That's a major scandal. I mean,
Explain that because that's a story that has not been amplified at
yeah,
all.
I mean, this is a bit of an aside, but right now Trump is implementing a maximum pressure on Cuba, trying to starve the country out in order to implement regime change, a long-standing U.S. goal, but he's intensifying it.
No,
Marco
it's
Rubio,
imperiling the sick. I mean, their
oh
hospitals
yes,
are imperiled. They
uh,
are literally being starved to death.
I mean, it's a similar policy at a different level of intensity to what the Israelis were doing in Gaza and continue to do in Gaza.
Hmm.
But Marco Rubio has been saying to Trump, we can make a deal with Castro, not Castro, with the Cuban government. It's still calling it Castro. It's funny.
Well, with the
Uh,
revolutionary government, because they,
yeah, I mean, it's still
with
the
that.
communist revolutionary government of
Well, they're
Cuba.
not communist, right?
Well,
Um,
leftist.
but they're
They're a
left.
social. They're a socialist government that is, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist. successfully
Mhm.
able to distribute the wealth of the country to the
Mhm.
public in a way that Western so-called democracies are unable to.
Mhm.
But the fact is, Marco Rubio said that he was negotiating, despite never having set any meetings for negotiations and lying to Trump about it. That's a pretty big scandal to lie to the president about negotiations with a country, especially when the geopolitical stakes are so high. But like you said, yeah, barely got a blip. But that's just one day in the Trump administration. These things like Trumping, the stealing from his base using cryptocurrency, a $1 billion crypto scam stolen, blatant, out in the open. No one cares. You can get away with crimes these days, and so a sex scandal. People are just so primed to, or the system is so primed to just pepper over these things without any real accountability. That when the crimes get worse and worse and worse and worse, the system can't handle it, and people who ought to be held accountable get away with it. That's what our system is hurtling towards. It's really a state of American exception, where
Mhm.
he who decides the exceptions is the true sovereign. And if you're the one who's able to decide that the rules don't apply in the situation, then then you're really in charge. And this is the face of American anti-democratic power, of American authoritarianism, of American fascism. I mean, that's really what we're seeing here. This unaccountability across the board.
Should Americans be concerned about the Epstein case, or is this much ado about nothing?
Well, they should absolutely be concerned in the same way that they should be concerned about many of the other issues facing our country. The question is whether or not they can do anything about it. And on this issue, I think the American people have been instrumental in making something happen on this. Like, if there was no public outcry to release the files, if the Trump administration were able to get away with that stupid memo they sent last year saying there's absolutely nothing to see here in the Epstein files, we've looked at them all, there's nothing to see here, go away. The reason that they weren't able to get away with that is because the American public cared, and because the American public, through various mechanisms, was able to translate that outrage into genuine political power, something that's very rare here. And it also coincides with the interests of uh, elites who might have a desire to see some of these issues come to light. But one of the other issues that I think that is also under discussed is that the release of the Epstein files is closely linked to Israel, and there have been people who have speculated, including former Israeli intelligence officials, that the Israelis are, through some mechanism or another, able to control what releases are occurring in the DOJ, or that the Israelis themselves have information that could also be released, um, that would be damaging to Trump, and that they are using the information that they have to push Trump to go to war with Iran, and that the run up to war with Iran right now, despite the doubts from the American establishment and the American military people, is a result of, in part, of that pressure, and that the Epstein files and the Iran war are linked. This is, can't be proven, obviously, but if we look at the signs, if we look at again these Israeli intelligence connections to Epstein, and we look at what Israel's goals are in the region, uh, then I think and then we look at Israeli methods of coercing and pushing American politicians to take steps involving America that, uh, by any standard measure, would be highly detrimental, highly destructive. But in order to advance Israeli interests, they do it anyway. There's plenty of precedent for this, and there's reason to suspect that it's going on now. Right. In fact, Netanyahu just got to Washington, D.C. yesterday, in part to lobby Trump and to coordinate with Trump about how best to attack Iran. Trump has moved the USS Abraham Lincoln into the Gulf and positioned to attack Iran. They've been moving military munitions and personnel into the region in preparation. In fact, just this morning, I read that Trump is considering sending a second aircraft carrier to support the attack on Iran. To me, this doesn't sound like an idle movement. It sounds like the preparation for something big. Netanyahu's in town. The assets are in place. The public, has been thoroughly primed against Iran for decades, but especially in the last month with the anti-government protests, and it seemed like they were going to go in then. But all of this seems to be indicating that an attack on Iran is imminent, and the Epstein leak or the Epstein releases. Not only do they provide incentive for Trump to distract the public, but as I said earlier, the powers that be, Israeli or otherwise, might be signaling to Trump that more is on the way should you not comply.
Why Iran and why now?
Why Iran? That's the age old question. I think the policy to attack and destroy Iran originates in both Israeli and Zionist and neoconservative American circles in the mid 90s with what was called the clean break doctrine, in which any threat to Israel or American control of hegemony in the Middle East region or the surrounding area needed to be stamped out. And this, at the time, included wiping out countries like Syria and Libya and Iraq, and culminating in Iran. As we've seen, Syria overthrown, Libya destroyed, Iraq also overthrown, nearly destroyed. Iran is one of the only regional powers that's left that's able to exert some sort of independent streak in the region. And so the Israelis, for a long time, have wanted that to be completely gone. Additionally, Iran also threatens Israel's control of its own occupied territory. Iran supports Hezbollah in Lebanon. Iran also supports Hamas and supports militias in the region that act as a counterbalance to Israeli influence. And so Israeli security planners are always talking about the need to get rid of Iran. But to do it, they'll need the United States because, unless they want to saturate the whole area with nuclear weapons, they really can't attack Iran with conventional weapons. And so Big Brother is needed. And so this clean break doctrine, you can read about it. They wrote a document about it. Occurred in the 90s, and it's continued to be more or less U.S. policy and Israeli policy for the last 30 years. There was a brief interlude with the Obama years in which Obama did negotiate a successful deal with Iran, much to the chagrin of Israel and the neocons at home. But that deal seemed to be holding, but very quickly the Trump administration abandoned that deal upon coming into office in 2017, implementing a maximum pressure campaign on Iran, ramping up sanctions, ramping up interference activities. When the Biden administration came in the office, they claimed that they were going to rejoin the Iran deal, but they didn't. They actually just strung along negotiations, kept it in limbo, kept the Trump sanctions, kept the maximum pressure campaign going until Trump came back. And now we are where we are. That they want to attack Iran. And in fact, last year we saw the Trump administration join Israel in sneak attacking Iran. While they were claiming to negotiate, saying that we're negotiating, and then bombing them out of the blue. There was nothing the Iranians could have done. They were negotiating in good faith, and they were punished for it. And then the U.S. joined in officially by joining in the bombing campaign. This was the 12 Days War of last year. And I think for very clear reasons, the Israelis and Americans didn't continue the onslaught against Iran. They were running out of anti-air or like air defense missiles, and Iran was able to exceed their expectations by striking key targets in Tel Aviv and other places in Israel. And so they seemed to die down. But I think the continued push or this renewed push is about taking the lessons they learned from that 12 Days War and applying them to a longer campaign to dismantle Iran. Hopefully it won't get that far. Maybe there'll be a lighter strike and it'll be a limited war like the 12 Days War. Devastating enough, but certainly not the worst case scenario. or we could be hurtling toward a regional catastrophe in which Iran is broken up and shattered and balkanized, which is another thing that they write about desiring for Iran.
Well, they can desire it, but does that mean it will happen? And I ask that question because isn't it dangerous to underestimate anyone or any country? Underestimation is always very dangerous. The 12-day war with Iran or the 12-day attack upon Iran, it had to be stopped because Iran stopped it. They were far stronger militarily than 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 the United States and Israel knew. And there's been this drumbeat to war. There's been this fight for Iran for more than 60 years after we threw out Mossadegh and put in the Shah, and then they threw the Shah out, and we've never forgiven them for that. It seems like these are people who, whether they like the current government or not, and everybody has takes exception with their current governments, even when you support them. That's just the nature of life. Do you really think that this would be a cakewalk? I'm not saying you didn't imply that. I didn't. I'm not inferring that,
I don't
but
think anyone thinks that this would be a cake. I mean, there are people who have said that, but I don't think that they are genuine, serious people. Now, everyone who's looked at this understands that the U.S. Navy was unable to defeat the Houthis, who are far less politically and militarily sophisticated than Iran, far less entrenched in their country and the people and in the political structures than Iran, and far smaller, especially. And if the U.S. Navy, if the full force of the U.S. Navy wasn't able to destroy them, then there's really no guarantee that they'd be able to uh, put a dent in the hierarchy, the structures of Iran. They might be able to destroy the country and shatter it, and blow everything up. Uh, but that they might not have the ability to do that. There's no guarantee. What this really risks is a broader war that could escalate, that could go nuclear. Because as Iran is getting strategically closer with the Russia and China, uh, the chances for escalation increase dramatically. The United States might say, well, Russia is now supplying Iran with something or another, and so now we'll consider Russian ships a legitimate target. These escalations happen every day, and they've been inching towards it over the last half decade. And I think this is the real risk of a war. I think that the American planners understand this more or less, but I mean, they understood that going into Iraq would be a disaster. They understood that going into Afghanistan would be a disaster. They understood that Syria would be a basket case. They understood that Libya would be a basket. They understand all this, and they do it anyway, because the interests of this Zionist, neoconservative drive seems to be overdetermining and kind of overrides the good sense of the people who should know better.
but what is it that they want exactly?
The Israelis want a permanent vision of security, and security in their world is defined as destroying anyone who could even potentially mount a challenge to you, making everyone scared of you. That's what they want. If they're able to destroy Iran, break it up, make it a disaster, even if Iran turned into, like, 15 little ISIS states, that would be preferable to Israel, because those 15 rump states wouldn't be able to uh, band together and challenge Israel's supremacy in the region. Israel would be the undisputed greatest power in the region, even if its security was genuinely imperiled by that. I mean, Israel's security was dramatically challenged by blowing up the Middle East. Uh, they don't seem to mind that. Israel's security is dramatically undermined by uh, occupying an entire people and genociding people. They don't seem to care about that. But under their definition of security, it's just being the strongest person in the room, and that's what they've enrolled America in that quest, and they seem to the Americans seem to be gung ho to join them in it.
But that flies in the face of that says right, might makes right, but actually right makes might. I mean, that has been ostensibly the source of America of the world's admiration for America in the post World War II era, right? But that has been uh, demolished of late, and and now you've got in the Middle East, for example, and around the world. Let's look at the Middle East now. What these Arab states have not been the saviors of the Palestinians, but now Saudi Arabia is is positioning themselves not as their saviors, but they're saying, no, you can't do this. And I'm wondering if the people are pushing against these monarchies, if there's not unrest um, with the common people of the Middle East uh, because of what's happening to the Palestinians, and how is do you see that happening? And should that be a calculation as we see this robust push for war?
Yeah, I think historically the Arab Gulf monarchies, the populations of those countries have been very pro-Palestine and very anti-war, and very critical of Israel, um, vehemently so at times. But unlike in Western democracies, I mean, even to the extent that they are democratic, unlike in those countries, the elite, the decision makers, are far more insulated from public opinion than they are here. And I was talking about how insulated, American oligarchs are from the needs and the concerns of the general public. But in these Arab monarchies, I mean, they're literal monarchies. They have kings, and they have it's the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It's like these are sultans who run the Sultan of Oman, Sultan of Bahrain. All these places, they're autocracies, and so the leadership, they pay lip service to concerns about Palestine, and when they need to enlist the public support in one or another public project or something. But overall, they've been really willing to sell out the Palestinians in support of peaceful relations with Israel and the United States and the accompanying wealth that goes with that. And if you're able to normalize relations with Israel, then the U.S. and Israel will give you all this economic packages. This was the basis of the Abraham Accords that Trump and Jared Kushner and others engineered in the first term. It was a normalization agreement at the expense of any serious movement on Palestine that the publics of these countries vehemently opposed, but was passed and ratified by the, these kingdoms. And so I don't think that these kingdoms are willing to make a big move in terms of going against Israel's designs in the region or going against the American designs in the region, but their voicing of concern is interesting in its own right. The fact that they're willing to do that means that they are concerned about the state of the region. I mean, the Gulf monarchies don't like it any more than Jordanians do when a country like Syria blows up and jihadis start spreading around the region. I mean, they don't want to deal with that. That's disastrous. And so sometimes they'll collaborate and sometimes they'll oppose, but overall, their disposition is to go right along with what the Israelis and Americans want because they get rich from it, despite the effect that it might have on their own countries and their own security long term. There are disagreements between countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, for example, though it's unclear to what extent they will feature in the conflict with Iran.
So what? So should we expect? It seems, as you said, the assets are in place for an attack upon Iran, um, and maybe a war with Iran. How would that impact Americans at home?
So that's a good question, and it will determine or it will depend on the nature of the attack. I suspect that the attack, I think the biggest and most immediate threat of the attack is the Iranians closing the Strait of Hormuz, which is really their trump card. so to speak, and that's one of their biggest economic levers that they can use against the Western world. And that could fluctuate all sorts of not just energy prices, but commodity prices in general. And Americans could feel that in their wallet, certainly. But it doesn't appear that Trump is gearing up for a major ground invasion in the same way that the Bush administration geared up for invasion into Iraq or Afghanistan. And it doesn't seem like this is going to be a long-term counterterrorism operation, with American boots deployed and bases on the ground. What appears to be far more likely is something like just a bombing campaign, in which jackals on the ground, their contras on the ground, are able to, maintain control or implement whatever agenda that the United States wants. But the U.S. and Israel, they mostly keep their hands off. Uh, and they're providing air support. They're bombing critical infrastructure, doing targeted assassinations, uh, but not regular troops on the ground. I doubt you're going to see, door to door fighting or like occupations of Iranian cities, anything like that. So I don't think that there'll be a contingent of Iran war veterans that will be created as a result of this. But that doesn't mean the effects won't be disastrous for Iran and the region in the Middle East, and even for Americans at home. It just means that it won't be as obvious to the public what's going on about why these things are happening. And it won't be so obvious that these things are happening. I mean, we joke about Trump calling himself the peace president, and that's obviously nonsense. But I think the element of truth is that he's averse to embroiling the American public in a war. He's averse to having, an Iraq moment or an Afghanistan moment. He's perfectly fine with blowing up countries, starting wars, and just heard he's moving 200 troops to Nigeria in the recently. Uh, but none of that is on the scale that would affect on a nationwide psyche, right? There is no contingent of millions of veterans who now have something to say about the lies that you told to go into war. Instead, it's just another thing that happens on television and another way in which life is getting slowly worse for Americans.
But is that smart for us to think that there will be no blowback? This is 2026, not 1926, not 1956. It's a different world. We've um, we are not. We're digitally connected and we're digitally controlled. Surely our grid and our way of life could be disrupted by people who are sympathetic. I mean, just to me, strategically, this is not smart. Beyond the fact that I don't think it's right, but it's just not smart. And it is. Don't you think it is? Well, it's such a display of hubris to think that you can go in and just upend anyone's government and destroy someone's infrastructure and kill their people and think that nothing is going to happen to you, Bryce.
Right. I think that the kind of hubris that has animated American foreign policy for the last forever, really.
Forever.
That's the essence of American foreign policy, this hubris. That's why we were in Vietnam. We thought we could reshape the whole world over there.
Well,
That's why we
that's why we're here.
that's why we're here. Everything about the American experience, about the American foreign policy establishment, about the way American oligarchy has conducted itself, is about hubris and about this exceptionalist image that we are in the right no matter what we do. Or worse, I think, in the words of Stephen Miller, that this is a world for the powerful, and that's how it's always been, and you can use your power to do whatever you want. I think those are the two tendencies that animate American policy. I think the Biden administration was this false, inflated sense of importance and goodness and morality, and the Trump administration is this maniacal sense of power and impunity and invulnerability. I think that those are two sides of the same coin of American empire that drive this engine forward that causes these policies to continue regardless of who's in office.
So, I mean, just moving forward, what do you foresee first with Iran? Um, do you see this attack going forward and
Absolutely.
evolving? Really, why is it? Why do you see it going forward? There's nothing that you think is going to stop it.
There doesn't seem to be anything standing in the way of it. There doesn't seem to be any force, any internal logic within the American Israeli intelligence, defense, military establishment that is pushing back against this. That's saying, no, we're gonna pull back. The only hope that I think would exist is the fact that there are negotiations and that Trump is talking to the Iranians, and the Iranians are very clear about wanting to make a deal, a genuine deal. Uh, but as we saw last year, that doesn't matter. They were just as genuine last year, and the Trump administration was meeting with them just as earnestly. Then one day they just bombed them. So that means nothing anymore. You can't. It's not a good gauge for whether or not there's going to be a war. And so all signs, including the aircraft carriers, including the military preparations, including the propaganda campaigns that they're running in the last few months, all that indicates that the establishment and the foreign policy apparatus is fixing towards a final showdown with Iran. Well, if not a final showdown, then at least a showdown, a culmination of the last year's rise in tensions.
The Epstein files fallout, will that continue?
I think it will. I think if Ro Khanna and Thomas Macy are, um, and other congressional people who saw the unredacted files, I think if they're serious about it, they have the ability to make some real waves. But it's unclear to what extent that it's unclear to what extent that those waves will change much about the American structure. As I
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, in the UK, it's changing a lot of things. It might even up in the government, but that doesn't seem to be happening here. It might. We'll see.
Well, just I think we will see. I mean, how do you think this is, how do you think this will impact the midterms? And more than that, how do you think this is impacting America? The Gallup poll shows that Americans don't feel good about America right now. Americans don't feel good about the government. They don't trust it. Americans are in a very, very challenging place. How do you think this will impact people? Because nothing seems to be going well and right.
It's unclear. I mean, this contributes to the general sense of the American public that America is not going in the right direction. I mean, you've seen polls that shows that people are more pessimistic than ever about the state of the country and more distrustful than ever of elites, and rightfully so. I mean, they're being screwed by elites, and this country is not on the right path. Um, but it's unclear how that'll be impacting the midterms. I'm not good at political punditry, but I can say that when people are feeling screwed and people are feeling unheard, they just vote for the other party. The
Hmm.
problem is in America, that party is the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party is not really a serious opposition
Hmm.
to the Republican agenda. They might stop it, but I don't think they've done anything genuinely to reshape the body politic of America in decades. And so I think the midterms might go in the Democrats' favor. Um,
But
but
what
I'm
will
not.
that mean?
Yeah, but what will that mean? It's not clear. And what's worse, I mean, we didn't even talk about ICE, but I mean, in relation to the midterms, Trump and well, actually, Steve Bannon was talking about how he's suggesting using ICE to intimidate people at the polls,
What do you think
which
about that?
well, I mean, I think it's just the next logical step of this fascist takeover of the United States, of this fascist run up. And again, there doesn't seem to be anything standing in the way of that. If they successfully pull that off in November, well, what's stopping them from doing the following November and the following November? There's nothing standing in the way of that, and that is a very disturbing prospect.
But do you think that Americans are going to take that? It just seems that when you look at Renee Good and Alex Pretty in particular, when you look at what happened to Keith Porter, it seems that Americans are there's something that has been unleashed in the United States.
I would love that to be true. I think I'm seeing it in my own organizing and activism, is that people are waking up to and being alive to the problems of America in a holistic and comprehensive way for the first time. And it took might have taken the genocide in Gaza, might have taken watching ICE execute people in the street, but people are getting there. The question is whether or not that's going to be able to be translated into genuine political power. Uh, like I said, the elites here are insulated uh, from democracy and from the needs and desires of the public. Uh, and it's only when the public is able to get organized and mount sustained campaigns of pressure that they're able to get anything. Like everything good that we've gotten in this world happened because people couldn't take the nonsense anymore and organized to fight against it. That is what I hope to see, and that's what I believe I am seeing here at the present moment. The only question will be, is it enough? And we won't know that until we win.
Well, you see Gus Kenworthy, who's lived in the United States for most of his life, who is British national. He, well, urinated F ice in the snow. You see, he posted that, and it is an image that went viral. There's something going on. You've seen Olympians who are more willing to be critical of the United States. Because young people are in a very different place, and obviously that is your generation. Just before you go, what is it that you see?
I mean, I think it's hard to judge based on things on social media that go viral because people are always upset about something and people always post about it. The real question is, are they going to get up and do things about it? Are they going to join organizations that are fighting back? Are they going to be able to translate that into adequately interfacing with political systems, or are they going to find ways around that can still achieve the same outcomes? That's the real question. I don't think that we're going to see that on social media. That's something that we have to see in the streets, in the public, in the libraries, in the meeting rooms, and I hope and I believe that we are starting to see the beginnings of that in the coming days, weeks.
Well, as always, it is a pleasure speaking with you, and you've given us a lot to think about. And there is a lot to think about at this time, and there's a lot to get to be energized about. Everybody, I hope that you get registered and vote. Make sure that you find out if you are still registered to vote because they are purging voters every day. Go to vote.org, vote111.org. Call 1-866 Our Vote. Find out if you're still on the rolls. Find out if you're still on the rolls. Vote.org, vote411.org, and 1-866 Our Vote. The primary season has begun. If you have trouble at the polls, call 1-866 Our Vote and do not leave the polls until your issue has been resolved. Work very hard not to use the provisional ballots. Get in that booth and cast your vote and push and push and push until you do. 1-866 Our Vote is staffed with lawyers who will guide you through the process. Do not leave the polls. Do not leave the polls until you have resolved whatever issue you're facing and you cast your vote. And don't go to the polls by yourself. My father used to say, it should be you and 4 or 5 other people. There is strength in numbers. There will be ice, not just at the polls, but they will be forming choke points before as you walk to the polls. Think about that. And so go to the polls and don't go alone if you can help it. Think about that, everybody. Check out Bryce Green, Bryce with an E, Green with an E, at the Green BJ on X. Check him out on Substack. Support him. He has a lot to say, and he makes a lot of good sense. I'm Santita Jackson, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Janae, I wanted to say this. She said, Bryce, she said, are you saying that regardless of the allegations against Trump, if the victims hire attorneys to bring charges against Trump, that he will not be forced to become tried in court to answer to these charges, impeached, prosecuted because he is the president of the United States?
Well, I think it's an even deeper issue than that. I mean, it's are the victims who made specific accusations against Trump? I mean, are they still around? Are they still involved in this? Are they still and also if they are, do they want to come forward? And if
Mm.
they do come forward, what possible proof could they bring forward? I mean, if I mean, the Epstein files, I mean, a lot of them are just FBI memos documenting allegations and documenting stuff that sources have told them. Uh, but that's far from something that's prosecutable. You know, that's a far cry from something that would stand up in a court of law
Mm.
and say that, oh, you're guilty beyond the shadow of reason. And you know, even if that did happen, yeah, there's no guarantee that like you know he'd be impeached for that. For that, you need Democrats and Republicans to decide to do it, and then removed. I mean, that's a whole other thing. You know, getting the other set of Democrats and Republicans to do it. So I think we're a far cry from that
Mhm.
even being a remote possibility. Once someone with a name comes forward, or once someone says I'm suing Trump, then we might be able to talk about it. But other than that, it's really just public perception. That's the biggest issue for Trump, and I think Trump was right when he said he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and still get away with it. Like I think that's fundamentally correct. So it would have to be very bad and very damning for Trump's term in office to be imperiled. And I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, and I think it's also true that he said, I'm trying to protect my friends.
Yeah,
See, not just Trump. We have allowed ourselves to put everything on him. He's the reason that we are in this position. You elect the leadership you deserve, but more than that, you elect the leadership that you are. He has held a mirror up to us, Bryce, and we don't like what we see. We don't like the racism. We don't like the misogyny. We don't like the authoritarianism. We don't like the grab at wealth. That's what presidents do. They typically do it out of office, but we've seen that. I mean, these folks are cutting deals. This is not new.
right.
Is it writ large? Sure, it's writ large because the media are allowing us to see it. They've covered everybody else. That is, they've given cover to everyone else. So just really, the question is, do you want to end corruption? Do you want not a more perfect union? Do you want to perfect the union? What is it that you want? Because you're the one with the power. When Americans decide that they want something different, trust me, those in power change everything around. They do. Remember,
Right.
you're the one. I mean, really. They had to, Tom Homan had to go into Minnesota because when you saw tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans who are mostly white get out in the streets in below zero weather, if you saw the fury of Alex Pretty, and then you saw him risk his life and he lost his life trying to protect the woman, trying to protect his neighborhood. If you go around Minneapolis right now and see people literally standing guard in their neighborhoods with guns, something else is going on in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and around the country. Be very, very clear. You're the ones with the power. I just hope that you will exercise your power nonviolently. The
Hmm.
genius of Dr. King is that he was able to lead a revolution with a Bible in his hand, not a bullet. People have always asked me, what does your father do? What has he done to help avert wars, Bryce? What has he done to free prisoners from countries with whom we have been engaged in military hostilities? I said, well, he's got a Bible, and he relates to people as a minister, and he relates to people as people. He does not relate to them as an imperialist. He says,
Exactly.
might does not make right. Right makes might.
Hmm.
So
And
thank,
thanks for having me on, Santita. I
I'm
gotta head
sending you
out.
much love,
Much
but thank
love.
you. Much love and many blessings.
All
God
right, see
bless
ya.
you. Bright screen, everybody. But think about that. Think about that, everybody. You all have we have the power and we have to use it, but we have to use it and we have to use it in a way that's godly, that's responsible, Janae. I mean, it's not, he's a 34 count convicted felon, and you said that ran for office to avoid going to prison and fooled a lot of people into voting for him with all the illegal things that he keeps doing and saying. Why the Democrats are not using their power to get him out of office. You know what? I have to tell you, these indictments uh, that we saw on the shenanigans around real estate. I didn't agree with that because people inflate, deflate the value of their real estate depending upon uh, how they can be advantaged in terms of their taxes. If they did not, Dwight McKee, may he rest in peace, said, if you don't want him to run for office, cut the deal and get him out the way. Because it's not just President Trump. He has people who really embrace him for one reason or another, and all the reasons are not racist. It's just like the pastor of your church. If people attack, it's just like when folks decide that they're going to attack Pastor Jamal Bryant. Trust me, he's riding with New Birth and people who've heard him preach, and they don't like it. So the question is, it's not about the person; it is about the patterns of corruption that are rife in the government and that are rife that proliferate with the powerful. I hear you, Janae, but I'm just saying, a convicted felon, all that was political anyway. It was just political. Because trust me, a whole lot of folks can be indicted for war crimes. We killed Gaddafi's daughter while she was asleep. That was a war crime. What we did to Gaddafi, killing him, that was a war crime. What we done over in Afghanistan is a war crime. Oh, please, we need to stop what's happening over in Gaza. It's a war crime. So, we have to make some decisions about who we are. And my sister, I would say, let us not just focus on a person, look at the principle. Do you want freedom? Do you want justice? Do you want people who serve you to not be compromised? He's not the first. That's how, a whole bunch of people have flipped their positions because they get a visit. We just need to stop it and start looking at this thing for what it is so we can make the changes that we need. Looking at him and making him the big, uh, the bearer of all of our sins, I think we're missing the point. Because this did not begin with Trump and it will not end with him unless we decide that it ends. Think about that. Think about it. He's not the first. He should be the last, but he's not the first. He's not. Think about that. I love you, everybody. I'll see you in a little bit. I don't know what else we're going to talk about. Tell me real quick, what else would you like covered today? We talked about Mrs. Nancy Guthrie. Bless her heart. We pray that she will be found alive and well. But the Epstein story continues to grow. People want to know what's what and who's what. They do want to know. Um, do you want to see more of the files yourselves? I mean, what do you want to see what the congressmen and women are seeing in both houses? Do you want to see? Because what they're seeing has them disgusted. It has people on the right saying, release it all. I I did not believe. I saw this one senator, I think it was Lummons, who said, I was ambivalent about it until I saw these tapes. Now, release it all. These people are sick. What do you think? And does it matter to you? And what's the big issue? Is it ICE? ICE, they are threatening to deploy them at the polls, and they will. So what does this mean? What does this mean? And they are expanding. They're expanding. ICE, they are being deployed in cities all over the country. In fact, I just read that uh, in Common Dreams this morning, and I was looking at that. What is that? ICE. Grand jury stops outrageous. Okay, they are. They hogtied a 14-year-old girl. ICE just did that, according to CBS News. Did you see that? There is an Irish um, national who is here legally. He's married to an American. He called the ICE detention center where he still is. He said it's a concentration camp. It's absolute hell. They're not being paid. They're not being given enough food. They're being packed in like sardines. Do you want to talk about that? This is someone who is in an ICE detention center, and this is what he's experiencing. And then I read in Wired this morning, ICE is expanding across the U.S. at breakneck speed. They said, here's what's going to happen next. Federal records obtained by Wired magazine show that over the past several months, ICE and the Department of Homeland Security have carried out a secret campaign to expand ICE's physical presence across the United States. Documents show that more than 150 leases and office expansions have or would place new facilities in nearly every state, many of them in or just outside of the country's largest metropolitan areas. In many cases, these facilities, which are to be used by street level agents and ICE attorneys, are located near elementary schools, medical offices, places of worship, and other sensitive locations. You want to talk about that? Okay. Because ICE is coming to almost all 50 states and territories. They're going to be deployed. What are they going to do? There were 600 police officers in Minneapolis. At one point, there were 3,000 ICE officers. The ICE officers outnumbered the police in Minneapolis 5-1. Now it's 4-1. Do you want that? Let's think about it. I hear you, Robert, but he's not the only one. That's the thing. He's not the only one. Trust me. From what I've seen, my experience has shown me this. Whenever you see every indictment is political, and the people who you see who tout family values don't value their own families, let alone yours. And the people who we have made the wild folks, they actually do value your families. Dr. King loved people, and yet they still want to tear them apart. Think about that. We just keep on going and going and going. Let's just get to the real point. Let's deal with that which is real. What you say, free labor for farms, Bernadette, for planting season. It's not free labor. My sister, it is unpaid labor. Like, we didn't get paid. Our ancestors, they didn't do work for free. They just were not paid. They were not paid. They were not paid. There was a wonderful song by the Staple Singers that I heard as a little girl when I was in Ghana. They were there. We were all there for the Ghanaian celebration of their independence. And the song was, "When will we be paid for the work we've done? When will we be paid for the work we've done?" And I hear you, Robert. The Epstein files show a lot of sickness, but we don't know who else they're showing. From what we can see, it's a whole lot of people in this. And this has nothing to do with party. It has something to do with power. And I think that we have some questions to ask and answer ourselves about morality. How much is too much? Remember in the 80s, they used to talk about the masters of the universe, these people who said, remember Wall Street, the movie, greed is good? Yeah, you can have too much. You can have too much. You can have too much power. You can have too much money. You can have too much. And we're seeing how the elites behave. Now I understand why my mother wouldn't let me go anywhere. Why every time I had big opportunities, she would fret. I mean, really get very upset. Someone presented me with a big opportunity, and out of respect for my family, called my mother. My mother read this man the riot act. She said, "I do not know you." She said, "And I don't trust you. I don't like you." And I was good and grown, and I don't want my daughter in any mess, because she knew some things, and my parents did their darndest to keep us away from the wickedness, and I thank them for that. So I have no appetite for it, none. So, I love you, everybody. I'm going to see you in a little bit, so we can talk a little bit later. But I love you, and I love you, love you, love you. Hey, Greg, everybody, do me a favor, help us with the algorithm. Like and share the show. Follow Bernadette. She always tells you to like and share the show. Please do that. Like and share the show. Like and share, like and share, like and share. Please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page and become my friend there. Like and subscribe on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please do that. And tell everybody about us and get involved. Remember, go to vote.org, vote411.org, 1-866-OUR-VOTE, 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Find out if you've been purged from the voter rolls. Hey, Effie, my sister, sending you so much love. Find out if you've been purged from the voter rolls, and continue to find out, continue to check up until the primary in your place. Because if you're not in a state that has same day on-site registration, you will not be able to vote. But even if you've been purged and it's too late for you to get registered, go on and get registered, because you don't want to miss this in the fall. But you're going to have to continue to check. You have to continue to check. Remember, they want to nationalize the elections. Remember, at least 10 states have turned over their voter data to the Department of Justice. So there's a lot going on. But the good news is this, everybody. We're beginning to ask and answer questions that are fundamental to the existence of the Republic. What do we want? How do we want it? Didn't Tupac ask that question? How do you want it? How does it feel? Yeah, he did. Yeah, I love me some Tupac. Met him when he was 13. He was performing at the Apollo at a Jesse Jackson for President event. And you saw his genius then. So, you said, why would Epstein, why would an Epstein John leave an island? Why would you take your children and your wife and the nannies? I don't understand that. But look, it's too much for me. I'm glad that the last thing my father asked me to do, that one more thing, when I went to college, just as we were about to pull out the driveway, he said, "I want you to find a church." See, don't get it twisted. However well known he's been, and some people consider him to be a celebrity, and that's not what I saw. Not with all the death threats we had, not with security outside the house and inside the house. No, celebrities have an easier time of it. They might deal with someone who's a little nutty, but what my father's work did threatened power, and they were going to try and kill him for it. So, but as well known, as famous as he became, my parents did not play any foolishness. And I'm so grateful to God. I'm grateful to God for that, because my parents let us know that we are first from the church. Hallelujah. And Robert, you said, Howard, oh, wow. Well, Lutnick. It's all awful. But now you're beginning to see, some things, right? Now you're beginning to see some things. Now you're beginning to see how things work. The jig is up. So I love you, everybody. I'm out of here, and I'll see you a little bit later.